Hello everyone, it's Camille again with another video on Gardevoir EX. Now I'm filming this on Monday and we have just seen LAIC conclude with a Jellygardy mirror match in the final. Now, in 1 week from now, we will have the Stuttgart Major Tournament. Now this is going to be the first tournament in which Phantasmal Flames will be legal for play. Now, how this concerns Gardevoir is that we have an insane tool in Mega Diancie EX that we can really use to improve some of our matchups. But the question here is, how good is Mega Diancie really, right? And how should we build our decks to accommodate for this really strong card? Now, in a vacuum, if we look at this Mega Diancie card, it's very powerful on its own, right? We have the ability Diamond Coat, that it takes 30 less damage from attacks, means that it has an effective 300 HP. This is really big for Gardevoir as it does not have Dark Weakness, and we can tank hits into these unfavorable Dark matchups while maybe even using Turo to pick it up afterwards. We also have its attack Garland Ray. This discards up to 2 energy cards from this Pokemon, and it does 120 damage for each energy you discarded. So this allows us also to hit a very good number in 240 early on in the game when we do not have access to all of our psychic energies. Additionally, this also allows our energy to be in the discard pile rather than locked onto a Pokemon. Right, when we play Gardevoir, a struggle that we sometimes have is that when we choose to use attackers, we have to commit many energy onto them in order to deal a lot of damage, but they get locked on that Pokemon afterwards. So with Mega Diancie, we can attach 2 psychic energies with Psychic Embrace, put 40 damage on the Mega Diancie, and then when we use Garland Ray, we discard them both to be used in future turns, right? Now Mega Diancie on its own does not reach enough damage to hit big one-hit KOs. Right? When we're talking about Grimmsnarl, when we're talking about Zoroark, when we're talking about Charizard, when we're talking about Absolbox, right? 240 is simply not enough damage. But in combination with Munkidori, we can now use Garland Ray with double Adrenabrain to hit 300 damage, right? This is very strong because it really improves our matchup, especially into Zoroark, as we can now KO the Zoroark in 1 hit without being worried about them KOing us back, right? The most important thing about this card is it is a basic, so it is very easy to find with Nest Ball. It takes no setup, and it has Metal Weakness, right? This is very big because oftentimes into these dark decks, all of our attackers and most of the Pokemon that we're going to use, especially Gardevoir EX, are all weak to dark. Now, if we can promote a board with Mega Diancie that has 300 effective HP, we can even boost that up to 350 effective HP with the use of Bravery Charm. This allows us to not only do a lot of damage to the main dark attacker that we're facing, but we can also tank hits. Now, the goal of this video is to show everyone how I approach deck building for new formats, right? We do not have any results apart from Asian results that have Mega Diancie legal, right? And since everyone has been preparing for the International in Brazil, there will be limited testing done in this format, right? Now, we have to consider a few factors in how we deck build going forward. The first thing that I like to do is I like to look at all of the City League results from Japan, see what's been doing well, see how Mega Diancie is being included, and then look at any Premier Ball championships, and also do a bit of theory crafting myself. Right? So this is going to be the goal. We're going to look at some lists that did well in the Premier Ball Championships. We're going to look at some lists that did well at LAIC. And then we're also going to see how these lists can be improved on for the upcoming Stuttgart Regional. First up here, we have a top 8 list from the Asian Premier Ball League Championship. Now, let's go over this list and see how they include Mega Diancie. So, starting off, we have the typical 3 to 4 Monkey Dory, right? This list chooses to include 4 Monkey Dory, which tells me that they are trying to heavily lean into maybe a tanking strategy with Mega Diancie, right? If Mega Diancie can tank a hit and then we can move all of that damage back, we can actually hit numbers such as even 330 with the use of 3 Adrenabrains and Garland Ray, right? So we have a typical 3-2-2 Gardevoir line with Screamtail, Drifloon, Mew, and Fluttermane. Drifloon is an inclusion that's quite interesting lately, and I think it does have a lot of merit. Now, when we're facing against a lot of these dark decks, or decks such as Absolbox and Charizard, where we really need to hit a really big one-hit KO, Drifloon does definitely do a better job than Mega Diancie, right? So this is something to also keep in mind. We also have the Fluttermane, which in my opinion does seem to be a tech for the Jellicent matchup, right? Straight Gardevoir struggles to play into Jellicent without either playing an Iron Bundle or a Boss's Orders or a Fluttermane, right? So this is maybe a nod to the Jellicent domination that's been happening over the last few tournaments. Now, when we look at the supporters, we have very, very standard 2 Arven, 2 Research, 3 Lily, 4 Iono, as well as all of the items and tools are quite standard. The one thing I want to mention, and this actually has nods to a lot of things that I talked about in my previous video, but we see the TM Turbo Energize here, right? So in the previous formats, we had Enamorus that would present an attacking option with no 2-prizer on board that is weak to dark, right? Now we can do the same thing here, but instead of Enamorus, we can use Mega Diancie. So imagine if we can have a Monkey Dory active and we can attach a Dark Energy and then TM Turbo Energize onto our Mega Diancie. Now, even without Gardevoir EX on board, we are threatening to hit 240 damage with essentially our Mega Diancie active that almost no deck can really one-hit KO right now. So this is something that's very, very interesting because I think that the combination of a non-Dark Weak attacker with TM Energize is something that is very, very strong and is something that I think is still somewhat underexplored in this meta. I think that the Enamorus build from the formats before were very, very strong and actually much stronger than a lot of people thought, right? We saw the Henry Chow group do very, very well with this Enamorus build, and a lot of the same concepts apply. The next list I have here is going to be another top 8 from the Asia Premier Ball League Championship. Now, this is going to be a Jellicent DX focused build with, we see the 3-2-2 Gardevoir, 3 Monkey Dory, the standard 2-1 Jellicent line. Also choosing to include Drifloon, which is quite interesting, as we also saw Pedro Pertusi include Drifloon in his winning LAIC build. So I think the Gardevoir builds recently have been shifting to really respect this Mega Absol box, right? Because Mega Absol box is getting a lot more popular with Tord Reklev winning the Vegas Regional Championships, and Drifloon really allows you to OHKO a big Mega Pokemon, getting 3 easy prize cards with very little downside. Now here they also choose to include the Mega Diancie, as in this list I think it really fits the role of a generally strong attacker, right? 240 damage with 270 HP, just strong stats, good damage. We also see the inclusion of Fluttermane here, which again, might be respecting the Jellicent mirror, but Fluttermane is also a decent attacker into Goldengo as it helps you pull off Devo plays, and in general, it's a good tool to have. It can come up in a lot of situations. One thing that I also wanted to mention that I didn't mention in the previous list is that we see most of these lists all cutting Pheasantipede EX. Now, what I hypothesize about this is that in the format right now, there is a decent amount of retreat lock. We see Absolbox playing multiple Yveltal, Grimmsnarl playing Yveltal, and in general, our Pheasantipede is very weak to clutch. Now, in the West, we have seen people adapt their lists, and almost all Gardevoir lists are including a copy of Professor Turo's scenario, right? It's very difficult to play Pheasantipede without Professor Turo, as you really want the Pheasantipede for that Absolbox matchup to be able to stabilize the board. Now, of course, Pheasantipede in general is a good card, and of course you can play it without Turo, but it is very strong in combination with something that can remove it from a retreat lock. Right? And I think it's also interesting because there is a trade-off, right? Pheasantipede EX, in my mind, is the heart and soul of this Gardevoir deck. I could not ever imagine playing this deck that relies on supporters to draw anything without Pheasantipede, right? If we're not playing Pheasantipede, that means that every opening hand without a supporter is basically going to be top deck mode for the rest of the game. Not only that, but with high copies of Lily's Determination, it's much easier to hit big combo turns where we're going to go Candy, Gardevoir, Countercatcher, Iono with Pheasantipede. Right? And then with combination with Mew, we can sometimes play our hand down, draw 3 with Mew, and then flip the script, draw another 3. So Pheasantipede is just really insane in this deck. I think it's the best card in the deck, best card in the format, and I think we really should be playing with it. Supporters are quite standard, although we do see the 3 Arven and 3 Iono. I really dislike this. I think that not having 4 Iono in your deck is simply just wrong. I think that Iono in Gardevoir is the strongest Iono is. I mean, you know, Iono is very strong in Dragapult, but allowing you to draw 6 while also disrupting, since we're often setting up, is just too insane to not play. Another few things is that they are playing a way to turn 1 Frillish, right? I think that we've also seen this kind of debate in the West where a lot of Jelly Guardian lists are not playing ways to turn 1 Frillish, so no inclusion of Latias, no air Balloon, and some are, right? We see Henry Chow and his group play the Latias, and we've seen other people play the Air Balloon, right? Now we have TM Evo and TM Devo. These are more or less standard, allow us to find our Curlias, our Jellicents, even our Gardevoirs, and it allows us to put a lot of pressure with Devolution against Goldengo, Grimmsnarl, and all of these evolving Stage 2 decks. The 1 Mystery Garden, 1 Artisan has become somewhat of a standard split now. I think in this list particularly, it makes a lot of sense since we don't have Pheasantipede. We need some kind of onboard draw supporter, so we can always Secret Box for, you know, a Lilies and then a Mystery Garden, and even if we Lilies into nothing, we at least have the Mystery Garden, so we can maybe discard and draw. So this list, you know, again, very interesting. They do play somewhat of a different format in Asia, but we do see that there are some interesting inclusions with the Drifloon and the Mega Diancie. So when we're deck building for Stuttgart, we just have to look at all this data with a very open mind, right? Everything is good. We don't really know what can be the best yet, but the thing with Gardevoir and why it's so difficult to play this deck and so difficult to deck build is that there is always a perfect Gardevoir list for each event, and they also change drastically between events, right? So just to end off here, very interesting stuff coming out of the Asian Premier Ball Championships, and that give us a bit of an idea of what cards we can include and what cards maybe should be included that aren't included. So for the next part of this video, let's go over some of the best performing Gardevoir lists at LAIC. So here we have Pedro Pertusi's winning Jellicent Gardevoir list. And we do actually see some themes that came up in the Asian tournaments, right? We see a 2-1 Jellicent line with the inclusion of Drifloon, right? This is a nod to the strength and popularity of the Mega Absol box, right? Having the option to use Drifloon to one-hit KO a Mega Kangaskhan or a Mega Absol is really, really strong in this format, as we can almost just win the game by KOing their Absol and leaving them no damage on the board, meaning that we have an insane tempo swing that often just ends the game on the spot. The next couple inclusions are 3-2-2 Gardevoir, as is standard, with the TM evolution, and everything else quite standard, right? Now, as I mentioned before about the Pheasantipede, here we have the inclusion of Pheasantipede along with Turo's Scenario, right? This is super important, as we really need an out to clutch, right? Clutch on our Pheasantipede is not good, as they can keep clutching and then take a 4-prize turn. But against Mega Absol, we really want Pheasantipede down, as every single Claw of Darkness is discarding important resources from our hand, and if we don't have any on-board stability, the game becomes very difficult to continue hitting our combos. A couple of other things here is that he is not playing TM Devolution. Now, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I'm really glad that Pedro was able to beat multiple Goldengos without TM Devolution. Now, I think the idea here is that in a lot of the evolving Stage 2 Dark decks, such as Grimmsnarl and Charizard, Devolution is very good, but he's choosing to play Drifloon to be able to OHKO some of these big attackers, right? So we don't really need the Devolution if we can instead choose to aggressively prize trade with Drifloon. Against Goldengo, this is quite interesting, because usually our ideal goal is to Frillish Shuffle and put a lot of damage on many Goldengos, and then Devo for a big 3 to 4 prize turn. Now, what is interesting here is that he seems to be playing more towards a deck out strategy, or even a war of attrition, right? So with the double Bravery Charm, it is very hard for Goldengo to go through 4 or even 5 Frillish, right? Because the Soul Rock with Vitality Band can KO a Frillish with 80 HP, but as soon as the Vitality Band comes down, we can start putting charms onto our Frillish, which makes the Soul Rock plan very weak, as they're only doing 20 per turn, since we are using Monkey Dory to move it back. Now, there's also kind of the idea that maybe if we can Frillish early and then we can slow Goldengo down, we can actually aggressively trade with them using Drifloon and multiple Monkey Dory. We can even use Clefairy's Full Moon Rondo, or we can even go into aggressive Jellicent and try to two-shot these Goldengos. So this is something that's very interesting that needs to be tested a bit more, but I do like the idea of no devolution. And as we saw, he actually did beat 4 Goldengos even while they were playing Lana's Aid, because it's simply not enough, right? They play around 11 to 12 energies. They need to attach to Goldengo to KO a Frillish with Charm, and they also need to attach to Soul Rock to KO any Frillish that are not charmed, right? And with 2 Charm, we can oftentimes run them out of energy and simply play towards a deck out. This is very interesting, and I think this is something that is actually quite strong going into Stuttgart, so it is worth testing. Now we see the 1 Artisan, 1 Mystery Garden. I think this is, becoming more and more of a standard split. I think that Mystery Garden not only is on-board draw, but it also allows you to use an Artisan early to set up while item locking, and then also bump it on the next turn to prevent your opponent from getting basics under item lock, right? The idea of playing 2 Artisan is very, very strong because it helps us set up, but if we're ever forced to play Artisan to find basic Pokemon under item lock, or even when we are locking them, then our item lock strategy becomes in general a bit weaker, right? So this is a list that I really, really like, and I think that I will be moving with something similar to this, moving to try and include Mega Diancie, and the question still stands, right? Do we play TM Evo? Do we play TM Devo? What is our Gardevoir line? What are our tech inclusions, right? So I really, really like this list from Pedro. Congratulations again to him for winning LAIC, just an incredible accomplishment, and I'm really excited to see how we can take this list and move forward into Phantasmal Flames format. The next list I'm going to talk about is Henry Chow's top 16 Gardevoir Jellicent list. Now, this Gardevoir Jellicent list is a little bit different, right? Unlike Pedro Pertusi's list, Henry Chow is deciding to go with a more aggressive turn 1 item lock strategy with the inclusion of Latias. Now, turn 1 Frillish, as we've seen, is not essential in a lot of matchups, but in the games where your opponent has a slow start and you're going second, being able to use that turn 1 Oceanic Gloom is really, really strong, especially into Mirror and Goldengo and any of these stage 2 setup decks that want to use items and want to use rare candies. Now here he's going with the 2-1-2 Gardevoir line. I really, really like this 2-1 Gardevoir line. I just don't think that playing 3 Ralts is that great, seeing as you know, we are going for this very control-oriented style, and we often have enough ways to find Candy Gardevoir, and we can easily play on 1 Gardevoir line. This also synergizes with the fact that he is excluding any TM evolution from the list, so we don't need multiple Kirlia, and a 2-1-2 line allows us to essentially save 3 spots, right? Ralts, Kirlia, and TM Evo can all be moved to other more impactful cards. We see the 1 Bravery Charm, the Pheasantipede alongside Turo, and here we see 2 counter catchers, right? I think that in Pedro's list we only saw 1 counter catcher, but he was including Drifloon, right? Counter catcher is a very, very strong card, but when our game plan into some of these matchups is to KO the active more often, we actually don't need that second counter catcher since we are playing no copies of research, and we can often just choose to keep the counter catcher for the matchups that we need, right? TM Devolution, still in this list, very, very strong into a lot of the stage 2 evolving decks, into Mirror, and also very strong into Goldengo, right? We see the Mystery Garden, we see the Artisan, same kind of idea with Pedro's list. And another thing I want to mention about Latias is that, you know, Latias is very, very good early and also in combination with Professor Turo, right? We can use Latias to get into an early Frillish, but this does stop us from putting extra damage on our Frillish to be able to use Adrenabrain, right? But we can solve this by using Professor Turo to pick up the Latias and have Frillish have 3 retreat again, right? So the Turo with Pheasantipede and Latias, super, super strong. Also playing the 2-2 Jellicent line, right? Almost everyone is playing a 2-1 Jellicent line, but I really find that this 2-2 Jellicent line is quite interesting because in Mirror, it's often a game of who finds Jellicent and starts attacking with it first under item lock, right? And playing that second copy essentially, you know, more or less doubles your chances of finding this. And if you can be the first one to initiate with a Jellicent, especially after using Latias to get into Frillish on turn 1, this is really, really powerful and can lock a lot of your opponents out of the games. we also see a higher count of Nest Ball here, which I really like. Since we're playing the Latias and less Ralts, we want more item search for our basic Pokemon. Nest Ball allows us to be really flexible and have a lot more copies in our deck for late game scenarios where we need to find Mew and Pheasantipede and other basic Pokemon. So I really like the consistency and the straightforwardness of this list. While a lot of people are maybe a bit worried or a bit scared about playing the 2/1/2 Gardevoir, in practice, it's actually really fine because often, even if we prize one Ralt, we only need one Gardevoir with the 3 candy. We often get it out quite early, and we can often use Lily and flip the script into Candy Gardevoir on our early turns. So this is the idea, and I think for me in my deck building process, I look at the list from the previous tournament, in this case LAIC, and I look at the ideas of the top players, right? So for this tournament, I really like Pedro's list and I really like Henry Chow's list. Now, the list that I'm about to show you are me trying to somewhat combine some of the ideas in these lists to be able to get, the power from both of these, right? So we'll be seeing what I will be testing for Stuttgart and most probably what I will be locking in. So here's the first list I have for you that I am considering for Stuttgart. Now, as you see, I've somewhat combined the Pedro list and the Henry list into one. So we still do see the 2/2 Jellicent. I think this is really strong into Mirror, especially because if we can attack with Jellicent early, we can often just lock them out of the game. I still have the 2/1/2 Gardevoir line, as 2/1/2 with 3 candy is how I prefer to play Gardevoir. I don't think any more is needed, and I really like the explosiveness of having multiple copies of rare candy. Now, I am testing and will probably play this Drifloon card, even though I haven't liked it in the past. I really do think it gives you an edge against the Mega Absol box and into Charizard, right? Another interesting thing about this list that I have here is that I am excluding the TM Devo like Pedro did, right? So the idea here is that into Goldengo, we can not only try to trade 2/2/2 if we get ahead with Drifloon, Mega Diancie, and even a Clefairy or Screamtail, but against Charizard, another matchup where we need TM Devo, we can instead choose to just blow up the active with our Drifloon and try to take prizes like that. Now, of course, this is still in testing phase, so don't take my word as Bible, but the Drifloon with no Devo seems very interesting. And also we have the 2 Bravery Charms, so against Goldengo, we're often going to go for a deck out win condition. We see the Pheasantipede with the Turo. This is a must. I will not be excluding Pheasantipede from my list. I just think the card is way too strong, and I want to have Professor Turo because it's just a good card to have, and is very flexible and also just removes liabilities, especially if we have a bad start or we have to bench Mew or bench other Pokemon so as to clear the bench a bit. Another thing I want to mention is that this list has Mega Diancie. Right, so essentially now we are really a toolbox deck. We have Drifloon, we have Mega Diancie, and we have a bunch of other attackers. I think that Mega Diancie fulfills a really important role where it's just a strong attacker that does 240 and is hard to KO. I think that it has a lot of value, especially into other opposing Jellicents, right? If you are facing a Guardian Jellicent that is not playing Drifloon, and you can one-hit KO their Jellicent with Mega Diancie, they don't really have many options, right? They need to either KO a monkey with Screamtail or KO something else, but hitting into the Mega Diancie is very weak. And even if they do, we can always Turo the Mega Diancie and, have an insane Tempo Swing. There's also no Latias in this list, which is saying that, okay, maybe in the matchups that we needed to use early item lock, we can instead go for a maybe more aggressive line with the 2 Jellicent, and also with more one-hit KOs, right? A deck that we really want to item lock early are decks like Charizard, Grimmsnarl, and Mirror, right? Now, in those matchups, I'm choosing to maybe play the Drifloon to Oko the Zards, Drifloon and Mega Diancie both are good against Zard and also quite good against Grimmsnarl, so maybe we don't need that turn 1 item lock. But against Mirror, we also have many options that maybe we don't need the turn 1 item lock, right? We have the 2 Jellicent, so it's easier for us to get into an attacking Jellicent, and we also have the Mega Diancie to respond to our opponent's Jellicent, right? So these are some of the ideas, and this is the thought process that I'm really thinking about when I'm building this deck. Now, the next list I'm going to show you is essentially identical to the other one, except I cut the second Jellicent for the Latias. Now, if you want to go for a more aggressive turn 1 item lock, I still think Latias is the best way to go. I think it's much better than Air Balloon, because when we play Air Balloon, we also have to increase our Arven count, and Arven count feels very okay, right? Arven is often a good enough card, but I prefer to play with explosive turns and to have very high combo sequences, right? So in this list, I cut the Jellicent, I put the Latias. This doesn't actually affect our consistency much. It does make it a little bit worse into Mirror because we have less chance of finding early Jellicent, but at the same time, we have an early Frillish option, which is also very strong into Mirror. So these two feel somewhat equivalent to me, and it's something to be tested, right? I think that Mega Diancie is also a great inclusion in all of these lists, along with the 2 Bravery Charm and the 1 Countercatcher. Now, if you notice, in all of these lists, I'm only playing 1 Countercatcher, and that's because I am deciding to play more aggressive attacking options, right? I think if you exclude Drifloon and maybe exclude Mega Diancie, then 2 Countercatcher is an absolute must. But if our plan is to go through the active a bit more in certain matchups, I think it's really fine to go down to 1 Countercatcher, as there are no copies of Professor's Research, means that we have 100% the choice on what to discard or not, right? So if we have a Countercatcher in our hand and we really don't want to discard it, well, we can choose to play a different line. 2/1/2 Gardevoir, the same, and also the Artisan Mystery Garden with the 3 Nest Ball. I think that I'll be testing these for this coming week, but I really like the idea of the combination of these 2 lists. I think that Drifloon is actually deceptively strong into this meta, and you know, Gardevoir is always at its most powerful when it is a consistent deck, but also when it has the most amount of options available to it, right? And I think this is something that this list and the one I showed you before really does quite well. So just to end off here, I think that, you know, if you're preparing for Stuttgart, it's important to look at the lists from LAIC, see what you liked about them, see what you didn't like about them, and then how could Mega Diancie fit into them, much as I have done here, right? It's important to, while testing, be creative and try new things, but at the end of the day, how you play and how proficient you are at piloting the deck will always be more important than your deck list, right? So be mindful to keep that in mind, that don't be scared to, you know, resort to comfort rather than, you know, playing anything new, because mastery of how you play the deck will always be most important. Now, if you enjoyed watching this video, you can find me in all the links in the description below, and happy testing for Stuttgart, and hope to see you there.